There are 241 town meeting members. 121 constitutes a quorum. The constable informs me that a quorum is present. The second session of the 257th annual town meeting will now come to order. The clerk being absent, this meeting must elect a temporary clerk. I recognize Ms. Brewer for a nomination.
I nominate Susan Audette as temporary clerk.
I hear the motion has been made and seconded. Hearing no other nominations, I declare the nominations closed and request that Ms. Brewer cast a single ballot for Sue Audette.
On behalf of town meeting, I cast a single ballot for Sue Audette.
Sue Audette has been elected temporary clerk for this session of the 2015 annual town meeting. Ms. Audette, do you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of town clerk? Say, I do. I do. Thank you. She hasn't done anything yet. Are there any new members in the audience, new town meeting members who were not sworn in on Monday? If so, please rise. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of town meeting member? Please say I do. Thank you and congratulations. Quick schedule review. We next meet Monday, May 4th, then Wednesday, May 6th. Then, if necessary, we also meet the following week on Monday, May 11th and May 13th. I've got some reminders here. First of all, in your second town meeting packet, you received a set of red and green tally vote cards. These cards are necessary and needed at every session of town meeting. If you forgot your cards this evening, please go to the check-in table now to get a blank set. You must write your name and precinct number on each card that is used. Tally vote cards without names will not be counted. Seats on the floor of the auditorium may be occupied only by town meeting members, except for the front row, which may be used by members of the press and by members of town committees and town staff participating in presentation of discussion of articles. Such persons must wear non-voter stickers, which are available at the check-in table. The seats in front of me on the right are occupied by the select board, the town manager, the finance director, usually an administrative assistant to the town manager's office, and an IT staff person. Finance committee is seated to my left. Spectators and town residents who are not town meeting members may be seated in the bleachers to the rear of the auditorium. New information for town meeting members can be found on the back table to my left. Old information can be found on the back table to my right. Amherst Media provides gavel-to-gavel coverage of our proceedings on Public Access Channel 17. I'd like to thank their staff and volunteers. Videos of town meeting sessions, always popular, are replayed frequently and can also be viewed on the Amherst Media website. If you wish to speak, you must raise your hand and be recognized. When appropriate, please hold up a red or green card to indicate pro or con on the issue. When you are called on, please first state your name and precinct. If you forget to do so, I will interrupt and ask you to do so. If you need more than 3 minutes or more than 5 when making a motion, you must request additional time before speaking, and town meeting will vote on your request. If you are speaking from the floor, please speak into a microphone that will be provided once you are recognized. This will allow viewers outside the auditorium to hear you. The microphone will be on when it is handed to you. Please hold it close to your mouth when you speak. Non-members who wish to speak should stand at the rear of the right-hand aisle. Any registered voter of the town of Amherst who is recognized by the moderator may speak without special permission. Others may speak with the permission of the majority. If you're making an amendment to a motion, the amendment must be presented in writing with 4 copies submitted to the front table. A copy machine is located on the end of the table. Procedural motions, such as a motion to refer or motion to dismiss, do not need to be presented in writing. So I'm assuming when I read all this stuff that it might be of value to somebody. So I would ask everybody to please be quiet and be patient and just listen. And if I can be convinced by anybody that you already know all this by heart, maybe I'll stop reading it. But I think it is of value, so you need to be polite and patient and quiet while I read it. Thank you. If you are making an amendment to a portion of the operating budget, please specify the dollar amount greater or less than the amount in the Finance Committee motion. If you make any motion from the floor, it must be the first thing you do after you have been recognized and have identified yourself. You cannot speak first and then make a motion. If you haven't already done so, please check your cell phone, make sure it is silenced or off. The election of 3 members of the Town Meeting Coordinating Committee will take place during the 5th session of Town Meeting on May 11th. If you wish to be a member or if you wish to nominate someone else, nomination papers were included in your second Town Meeting packet and can also be downloaded from the town website. The nomination deadline is May 5th. You can submit nomination papers and candidate statements here at Town Meeting or at the Town Clerk's office. This is an important committee that is working hard to educate and inform Town Meeting members and to improve the process of Town Meeting. Please participate as a voter or a candidate. If at any point in time you are confused about the proceedings, it is appropriate to call a point of order and ask for a clarification. It is also always okay to phone me, send me an email, or see me prior to Town Meeting if you need an explanation of any kind. We left off with a final vote on the community service section of the budget, so we are now up to the conservation and development section. The corresponding Finance Committee page that we're looking at is page 25. And I call on a member of the Finance Committee to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is this on? Check. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. All right. I move that the town raise and appropriate $1,285,577 for conservation and development.
I hear a second. You may speak to your motion.
All right, so the details of this are on page 25. As the moderator said, I'll just summarize where we're at. The budget is an increase of about 10.7%, and that increase is the result mainly of the reorganization of the Inspection Services Department as part of a customer service improvement initiative in FY15. As you heard earlier on Monday from the town manager, the health inspector and an assistant sanitarian will move from the health department to the inspections department to consolidate services and improve efficiency. The increases in the inspections department budget are partially offset by reductions in the planning department budget made possible by the restoration of the town's mini entitlement status under the Community Development Block Grant Program. So that just sort of explains why it's a 10% increase. And the Finance Committee voted 6-0 with 1 vacancy to approve this.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion. The voting requirement is a majority. And as we do with all of our Article 11 sections, I'm going to quickly go through the line items as they're printed out on page 25 of the Finance Committee report to see if there's any specific questions. Then we open it up for general discussion. Then we come to a vote. So, any questions on the conservation line item? I'm looking, I see no hands. How about the planning section? I see a hand right over here. Yes. Wait for the microphone, please. Raise your hand, sir, so she can see you. Yeah.
James Perrott, Precinct 1. I see the planning going down by 7,000 and inspections going up by 117,000. How can you explain that difference? If you move 2 people, I can understand the 117, but why isn't planning going down by 117,000?
Mr. Masanti.
Yeah, the inspection services increase here is almost entirely a transfer of existing dollars that in the current year were budgeted in the health department budget. 2 inspectors are relocated to the inspection services office, so it's not any new positions, it's just a shift of dollars between budgets. The planning budget decrease is primarily because one of our planners planners, Nate Malloy, who is our primary administrator of our CDBG grant, is funded, half of his salary is funded through the block grant now that it's been restored to the town. That helps us on the town portion of the budget.
Thank you. Any other questions on the planning line item? Yes, in the back corner there. Microphone?
So, Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. So I have, I guess, comments on the planning department budget. One is that unlike Northampton, which I think has fully realized the potential implications for its community of the MGM gambling casino in Springfield, I have yet to observe any activity whatsoever in this town related to the potential that the casino could simply send luxury buses to various parts of town where well-off individuals live, or individuals with a lot of leisure and some money, and scoop up a lot of people who might otherwise be using our downtown with the offers of free food, free drinks, and free entertainment in return, in many cases, for individuals' parents' money. So I am disturbed by the lack of planning or even any public discussion as opposed. The other problem I have with this budget is the continued leadership of the department in a direction that I think is very anti-family. The focus on in pushing as many undergraduate students to as many nooks and crannies of the neighborhoods of this town over the last 10 years with lots of zoning articles.
I'm sorry, what's your point of order?
Like what I say.
The speaker is outside of the intention of the article. He's speaking disparagingly of town staff.
Okay. I'm the only one who can respond to that. Nobody else can, okay? And I'm sorry, I apologize because I was giving a note to the clerk and I didn't pay attention for about 20 seconds. You may continue, Mr. O'Connor, but I will be listening carefully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm explaining why I'm not going to vote for this budget item, and it relates primarily to the planning department. And one is the failure of the town to do any planning for the impact of casino gambling from Springfield. And the other is, I think, the mistaken direction that we've taken for the last 10 years, very anti-family direction in this continued stream of articles designed to implant students, undergraduate students, in every neighborhood in downtown.
I'm going to stop you there, Mr. O'Connor, because you can't talk about the motives of other people or other committees, and it sounds to me a lot like you are, so please, you may continue, but stop doing that, okay?
I'm talking about the articles.
You may continue.
And the net result of this stream of zoning amendments has been, I think, to contribute to the driving out of families from the town, and in fact has had the exact opposite impact on school support that in fact was discussed with these articles. In other words, driving families out reduces the number of kids in school and the amount of state aid we receive for them, and the net return in the property tax increases that we have experienced have in no way kept up with it, which have led to the very difficult situation that our schools face now. So I can't vote for this department, and I think these are two very good reasons.
Thank you. Dealing with technical difficulty? There it is. Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to inspection services, and in general discussion, we can get back to planning if we want. Do I need to explain why I'm doing this? Are people confused? Okay, so here's the deal. I need to make sure that all sections are covered at least a little before I can permit someone to call the question. If I allow a calling of the question right away, then we may never have gotten to something like license or permits and rental of land. However, if I focus the discussion for 20 minutes on planning, then no one's allowed to call the question either. So there will be some general discussion, and if I notice hands now, I'll try and get back to them. But we need to move on and cover at least a little bit of every section. Then in the general discussion, we can come back to things, but also people are then able to call the question and then debate. So it's this kind of funny compromise I have to do. So anything on inspection services? Yes, center back there.
I have a brief question on
Identify yourself, please.
planning department budget that I think is appropriate.
I'm sorry. Please identify yourself.
Paige Wilder, Precinct 10.
Can you make continue?
The Finance Committee report doesn't make any mention of the $1.5 million grant that was given to the town, but on the page 180 of the manager's report on the budget, it appears under the planning department. And it references work done for Gateway and burying wires. And I'd like to know if the entire money allotted is going to be used for burying the wires, or there's additional work toward Gateway, whatever that is. Thank you.
Mr. Masanti.
As we explained last October, at the time of the grant award, the $1.5 million awarded is to bury utility wires on East Pleasant Street and portions of Triangle Street. And there'll be some sidewalk work in the vicinity where the wires are being buried. That was the purpose of the grant. That's what it's being used for, and you'll see those above-ground wires go away this summer.
Thank you. Anything on inspection services? I see a hand back there in the center.
I'm sorry, but I have a follow-up, and it won't make sense
I'm
about
sorry.
this. It's Rolf Carls from Precinct 10. Sorry. In the budget that we got, it says that this grant is going to develop Gateway, and I'm curious what Gateway is defined now by the town manager. That was very explicit in your explanation of this. So we know about the burying wires, but it also says in your words, I think, to develop Gateway.
You care to respond to that, Mr. Masanti? Okay, hold on a sec.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Masanti.
Yeah, what the question is referring to is a list of town grants received that's as an appendix in my recommended town budget that I presented to the Select Board and Finance Committee back in January. There's a reference to the MassWorks grant that talks about the $1.5 million to redevelop the northern gateway to the town center. This is part of a redevelopment of the north end of the downtown, as we discussed at length at the time of the grant award. It has nothing to do with North Pleasant Street, closer to campus. It has to do with burying the wires right at the northern tip of downtown.
If I could,
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pooler.
So on page 180, it's a lowercase g. It's just a generic term. It is not meant to refer to what is commonly referred to as the gateway, which is the section up closer to UMass. It was just a term that had no particular meaning referencing that other area.
Anything on departmental receipts? Yes, I see a hand on the aisle there.
I'm trying to figure out the impact.
Identify yourself, please.
Hilda Greenbaum, Precinct 1. I'm looking at the actual receipts and the budget for 15 and 16 under receipts and under licenses and permits. And I understand that there's something in excess of 1,300 rental licenses in this town, and I don't quite see where that 1,300 times $100 shows up in this budget. Thank you.
Anybody at the front care to respond at this point? Mr. Pooler.
I'll respond to it. Let me look it up and I will respond.
Thank you. Anything on licenses and permits? See no hands. Rental of land? See no hands. Water fund? Taxation? Any more general discussion about the conservation and development budget? I see no hands, so we will come to a vote. Well, only if he has it yet. He hasn't raised his hand yet. Mr. Pooler, give it a try.
I will. I'm just trying to. So, Ms. Greenbaum, I believe your question is on page 25 under the license and permits, what the difference is in the receipts from one year to the next. And I couldn't quite catch which 2 years you're comparing.
Miss Greenbaum, excuse me. Miss Greenbaum, we don't have conversation back and forth, so if you want to respond, you need to raise your hand, you need to be recognized, and you need to identify yourself, and you need to wait for the microphone, all those things. So do you wish to be recognized? Yes, microphone then. Go ahead.
Yes, Hilda Greenbaum, Precinct 1. I'm looking at both of those lines. The money came in last year, January. I don't know what year that was. Was that actually 13? When we started paying money 18 months ago into the rental permitting.
Mr. Pooler, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be strict about this. If you want to respond, you raise your hand and you're recognized, and then I will let you respond, okay? We can't, so raise your hand if you want to. Mr. Pooler, there we go.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator. The answer is that things that came in last January show up under the FY14 actual.
Are we now ready to come to a vote on conservation and development? I see no hands. This is, as stated, a majority vote. And we have the motion up before us on the screen. All those in favor of the motion as it appears on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. Moderator, here's a majority. The ayes have it. We now move on to General Government, Section D. You will find the Finance Committee report beginning on page 26. Do you have a point of order?
I'm not sure, Mr. Moderator. Adrienne Terizzi from Precinct 7. I was hoping that there would be an appropriate time to address, make a quick comment in terms of town meeting regarding the papers that are on the back table. May I make it?
I think now is not an appropriate time. You need to see me, and I don't know what you're referring to, so.
A paper without attribution, and I thought that we had decided many years ago that any papers left for town meeting members on the tables should have the originator of the particular paper.
Okay, so that's a valid point of order, but my understanding is that the latest, that our town council actually posed that question to somebody higher up in the state government, and the answer is no, we can't require that. We might have personal feelings about the pros and cons of signed information back there, but we can't require it. Anonymous papers are legal and valid in town meeting. Sorry. Okay, we're now moving on to general government, and I call on Mr. Braun to make a motion. Mr. Kubiak's going to make a motion, okay?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town appropriate $6,483,937 for general government, and that the salary of the moderator be fixed at $100, that the select board at $300 each, and that of the elector under the Oliver Smith will at $20. And it's a bargain. And to meet such, and John won't submit it all in one place, and to meet such appropriation, $6,374,924 be raised by taxation, and $109,013 be transferred from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation accounts.
Do I hear a second? I do. You may speak to your motion.
There are ample details on pages 26 and 27 of the Finance Committee report, so I'm going to offer you some highlights. This budget covers a wide range of administrative, technical, and support functions to manage the town, and overall the budget is up just 2.4% from the current fiscal year. Some of the highlights for the FY16 proposed budget include the addition of an Economic Development Director in the Select Board Town Manager's office. Creating this position was noted as an important innovation in the Town Manager's budget overview in the first session of town meeting. The position will be tasked with promoting business opportunities to increase the town's revenue and to provide the town with additional resources to improve our economic condition. We like to talk a lot about sustainability, and this is one step towards helping us with that and overcoming some of the difficulties we've seen in predicting state aid. The Human Services Human Rights budget has a 21.9% increase from the current fiscal year, reflecting in large part the town's portion of the Amherst Together Coordinator, a position shared with the schools. The town is responsible for 1/3 of that position. Employee benefits decreased by 0.8%, which is a remarkable achievement considering that health insurance comprises 87% of the cost of employee benefits. This is due to decreased HMO premiums and employees choosing to switch to that plan from the preferred provider plan. Temporary staffing and training due to employee retirement contributed in part to the 8.2% increase in the town clerk's office. That's a temporary increase. You won't see that in the next year. Cost of living and step increases are included in that 8.2% increase. And finally, elections and registrations is decreased by 13.2% because there's one less election in the upcoming year. The Finance Committee unanimously recommends passage of this budget as written.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion. This vote as a majority requirement. So as with the other sections, we are going to be looking at page 26, General Government, and going through those line items. And actually first, since it is the first item, Select Board Town Manager, I'm calling on Mr. Burkhart, who has asked to be called on to make a motion. Mr. Burkhart, you are recognized. Wait for a microphone or come forward, whichever you choose.
Michael Burkhart, Precinct 6. I move to reduce the general government's total appropriation of $6,483,937 by $85,901. This will reduce the appropriation for general government down to $6,398,036.
Do I hear a second? Thank you. You now may speak to your motion.
The proposed hiring of an economic development director is clearly premature. It is a solution without a clear goal. Has the town defined what kind of economic development it truly wants? According to one expert on regional planning, development in Amherst is driven by two engines, the university and real estate. Given the proven ability of both these agents to do this by themselves, what is a new town-funded director of economic development expected to accomplish that these two engines cannot do for themselves? Amherst does not have a plan for economic development that was created via a broadly inclusive process that includes many residents from multiple neighborhoods, multiple income levels, and all age groups. You might hear that this position is necessary in order to implement the recommendations of the Town Gown Steering Committee. That committee was certainly a response to the university's concern about the lack of housing for students. While this committee might serve the university's needs, its final recommendations do not even include data about current or expected impacts on neighborhoods. The committee itself did not include any members who are low-income renters, excluding students, or young families looking to buy starter houses in Amherst. The final report supported the idea of more public-private partnerships that would develop student housing with businesses on site. Have we as a town decided that this is what we want? Given the ever-accelerating rate whereby houses are being turned into student rental housing, Is this the direction that a majority of the year-round residents want? In their evaluation of the final report, 2 of the members of the Town Council Steering Committee wrote the following, quote, "In the area of economic development, U3, which was the consulting group, put forth valid but overly conceptual ideas for enhancing the positive impact of UMass and UMass-based entrepreneurship on the Amherst economy, and did not provide insight targeted toward Amherst's unique location and size relative to this particular flagship state university. We support the town gown's efforts to expand economic planning beyond the issue of housing and recommend a more coordinated future joint planning structure for economic development than was present in the U3 report. We endorse the idea of a new joint planning committee, but urge a different structure that ensures inclusion of key stakeholders needed to ensure a process that receives broad support from Amherst citizens. I hope you will vote to strike this expenditure until we have created a comprehensive plan for development that is endorsed by a wide array of stakeholders that would include proportional representation of low-income renters, young families, and especially those who live here year-round. Thank you.
So hang on, just so folks understand the process. First of all, we now have 2 numbers before us. We have the higher amount, which is the Finance Committee amount, and then a lower amount, which is Mr. Burkhart's amount. So when we finally come to a vote, we will first vote on the higher amount. If that passes, we're done. If that fails, we then come to a vote on the lower amount. So that's how the final voting will work. What's going to happen now, I'm going to let committees and there's a couple people who have asked to be recognized if this motion was made. I'm going to recognize them and maybe a couple of other people to talk specifically about this, but then we're going to stop talking about this and move on to the rest of the line items just to make sure we've covered everything. Then we can come back to this later, but at that point in time, a motion for the previous question will be in order. That makes sense to everybody? Good. So, Mr. Steinberg?
Yes, I request 2 additional minutes.
Granted without objection.
Okay, thank you. And I note for my colleagues in town meeting that I don't see a clock where I'm sitting. I'll do my best. The Select Board supports the budget as was originally proposed, 5-0, and that includes the Economic Development Director. You know, I need to start by just commenting from my perspective of having been on the Finance Committee for 8 years. And during those 8 years in the Finance Committee and the Finance Committee before and since, has always had to focus very hard on questions of sound financial management and the expenditure side of the budget. In the expenditure side of the budget, we often heard about needs both for continuing current programs and many unmet needs, including some that we talked about on Monday night, adequate funding for LSSC, funding for library, funding for human services, and many other unmet needs. The frustration that I confronted in those 8 years on the Finance Committee is that we were dealing with the expense side of the budget, and I always felt that the solution came out of the revenue side of the budget. One of the reasons that I decided to run for Select Board last year was in order to be involved in a body that could address the revenue side, and that is one of the 3 things that was very much on the minds of the Select Board this year. Another thing that was on the minds of the Select Board is housing needs and the needs for making sure that we have an affordable and diverse community. As long as we have taxation that is heavily dependent upon residential property, it increases the taxation burden on residential property. And one of the strategies that very much can be a part of trying to create more affordable housing is to reduce some of that pressure by looking at some of the more development within the commercial side. And then I think that we're all as a community always concerned about employment opportunities. This discussion of an economic development director is not new. I've heard this discussion many times. I went back to one of my old Finance Committee processes of 2009, which happened during 2008, and I looked at the town manager's budget for that year, and there was discussion about what an economic development director. And it was the town manager couldn't recommend it at the time. Last year on the budget, the economic development director was the #1 unfunded budget need. So this has been in discussion for a long period of time as an identified need. And the select board considered that as we looked at the town, making recommendations for goals for the town manager for the current year, and the select board guidelines for the development of the town manager's budget, which I referenced in my remarks the other night. So those documents very much influenced the decision to come forward with a recommendation for an economic development director. And I think the select board was unanimous in its being pleased that we have finally made that move in that direction. Those of you who have been following it and follow our meetings would know that we, as select board, were presented with a draft of the job description. We looked at the draft of the job description, commented on it. The job description has been developed and is being circulated. And it talks about a person who's going to work with the town manager, is going to have the skills to reach out to businesses and to talk to businesses, identify businesses that are considering location within Amherst, and to try and then serve as a liaison between the businesses and town committees and staff to try and encourage many of those businesses that have frequently gone to our neighboring communities to consider locations within Amherst. This is not a new discussion, as noted. Not only has it been in budget discussions for many years, but this is consistent with the town gown recommendation, as has been previously noted, and it is consistent with the master plan. And it is not something that is merely focusing on downtown. This is a town-wide position, and it would be to address looking for business opportunities that could find a location throughout the town. So with that, I would just conclude by saying that if we delay in creating the position further, we risk just losing more opportunities. So thank you.
I'm going to call on Rolf Karlstrom, who asked to speak. I'm sorry, I'm going to call on Rolf Karlstrom now, who asked to speak.
Okay, Rolf Karlstrom, Precinct 10. Mr. Moderator, could I ask for 2 additional minutes as well?
All those in favor of granting 2 additional minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. You may proceed with 5 minutes.
Thanks. That'll save a heart attack. I hope I won't take the whole 5 minutes. So I'm going to vote in favor of this motion to reduce the government budget by the salary of this economic development director. I was part of the town gown steering committee that's been referred to, and actually one of the authors of that, what we're calling the minority report, that was referred to by Mr. Burkhart. And I want to speak to my experience, my little background about the committee and how this recommendation came about from the town gown steering committee, and why I think it actually is premature and quite unwise to move forward with this economic development position at this time, before the town gown process can catch up with town, which is trying to run ahead here, and actually do it right. So yes, it's been a long time in coming. I think it's time to do it right. We have a new process in place we need to take advantage of in this case. So as I said, I was part of this town gown steering committee. My role was to represent both UMass as the chair of the biology department and to represent neighbors as a resident on the periphery in a peripheral neighborhood. So I had 2 hats to wear. And we'll hear later that when this U3 report, this is the advisor's report, will be coming to town meeting, I believe on May 11th, will be conveyed to you by and was conveyed to the chancellor and the town manager by the town gown steering committee with a conveyance letter and with a series of documents that are all available on the website. And instead of wasting paper, I thought I would, if this can work, I would put the web link up there and show you what this web page looks like. I think it's very important to look at these documents in town meeting and get an idea of what we actually paid for with our $30,000. There's some very good data in this U3 report, and there's some recommendations that I took great exception to, and it will be up to town meeting to read these documents and decide what they think is the right direction for Amherst. To cut to the chase on this argument, U3 had two recommendations pertaining to this development position. One was it's not up yet? Do I need to do anything?
I don't think so. Can we get the overhead on the screen?
I can hold it up. Or pass it around, how about?
What is it that you're trying to show?
He's got a document on the overhead there.
Aha. Okay. So this is just a screenshot of the website for the Town Gown Steering Committee that's hosted by the UMass. And, sorry?
I think you'll just have to.
There we go.
They'll
Okay.
try and
The
focus
web
it, but-
address is on the top. It's a UMass site with Town Gown Steering Committee, town-gown, and then under the tab Related Documents. It's a little hard to find. This is where you'll find all the documents that are important for town meeting. And toward the bottom of that page, I've pointed to 4 particular documents, just so you know what it looks like, including our minority report, this evaluation of the youth report, second from the bottom. So all those are links that will bring you to extensive documentation I think is important for people to read. Yeah. Okay. So U3 had two recommendations related to this discussion. That was the creation of a new version of Town Gown Steering Committee called the University Town of Amherst Collaborative, UTAC. You will be hearing this more and more. And the creation of an economic developmental director. I believe that UTAC needs to come first for this development director to make sense, and that the process needs to be carefully done. We've waited a long time for this development director, apparently, and we're at the edge, I think, of having a new way of crafting an economic future for Amherst that could be, if done well, I think a breath of fresh air and take us in new and important directions. I think Amherst can be a model for college towns across the country if we embrace all elements of our community in this new UTAC. So to my knowledge, this University Town Committee has not been formed yet. I'm not at all clear on what the process of forming that committee is, but I urge that the committee have strong representation from, again, neighbors, including Coalition of Amherst Neighborhoods and other groups, as well as those that were left out of the U3 process. The goal should be to look, these people who are not included often can bring perspectives and ideas in economic development that really can give us a new and better way forward. And so I think we need to create, I've hired many people in the biology department. It's critical at the job description and job ad phase to craft the type of job position you want for your town. And I think we are in the middle of a town gown planning process that's quite, has a lot of potential. And in fact, this economic development position should come out of the UTAC and have very strong ties, linkage to one of the major players, UMass. And I think going ahead as a town-driven initiative on its own prior to UTAC formation is unwise and is a mistake. So this motion to reduce the money to town on the budget is one way for town meeting to send this message that a broadly representative UTAC, UMass Town of Amherst Collaborative should be formed before an economic development director is hired, and that UTAC should help craft and position the position to maximize UMass and town synergies. U3 actually provided a template that our town needs to customize. and I hope that town meeting will vote for this amendment.
Excuse me. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I was aware of the clock. I was giving a little extra time because there was an interruption, but I believe you're set now. Thank you. I was contacted by Don Kortemanch, the Executive Director of Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure if he's here. Looks like he is not. Oh, there he is. Good. Please step forward, sir. And Mr. Kortemanch is not a registered voter in Amherst, so all those in favor of hearing him speak, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. You may introduce yourself and speak. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Don Kortemanch, Executive Director, Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce. Forgive me for reading. I need my notes tonight. On behalf of the 500 member businesses and institutions of the Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce, I'm here to speak to you tonight on the importance of the proposed Economic Development Director position. The Chamber views this position as a home run for the town, as it is an investment in economic development. The economic development, not only in our downtown, but also throughout our village centers, will generate the jobs and tax dollars that are so sorely needed for many of the projects and programs that we cannot currently fund. Without tax revenue from new businesses, our town will find it increasingly difficult to pay for the things we care about. Right now, we are not attracting enough business to do that. Attracting new business and grants is a skill. We're in competition with neighboring communities that are very good at that. We need a paid professional with which the skill is to do that. Getting to the UTAC chicken and egg discussion, I firmly believe that it's just that type of position that can guide UTAC to being extremely good at what we're asking it to do. We're asking it to guide economic development for our town. Without having a paid professional with those skills in place to do that, I think that, again, it's a chicken and egg conversation, but I think that that position needs to be in place to guide that new agency. So I urge you to vote for our town manager's recommendation to fund this important investment in our future. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to accept 1 or 2 more comments on this section before we move on. Back there, yes.
John Coop, Precinct 2. We are a host community to a world-class university, and from that university emanate all kinds of great ideas and companies as a result of those ideas. We're retaining way too few of those. And granted, we only have so much geography, but that's the point of having an expert engaged in trying to bring us the best and the right fit of these enterprises. It's an opportunity we cannot pass up. Further, you'll have to note that more people brought here to good-paying jobs can also mean more people available to buy single-family homes and have them not turn into rentals, to contribute in meaningful ways to our government process and to our town. I urge you to vote for this position. I think it will be beneficial to all. Thank you.
In the front from the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Excuse me, I really am not interested in hearing comments on my selection of speakers. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief. The remarks of all the previous speakers actually remind me about what I like most about this political system and town meeting. Also why it's sometimes difficult. But I think the thing is that people here are deeply committed to the civic process and civic engagement. There's also a large consensus. We stand for the same things. We want a greener, sustainable community. We want to keep open space. We want to have more affordable housing. We want better jobs for people. And as we heard yesterday, Monday night, we want to embrace our diversity, not ignore it, not neglect it, not reject it. I think the fights are sometimes so intensive because the difference is so small. We're all pretty much on the same page. So there are some philosophical differences about what government can or cannot do, and there are some differences about practical matters, what's within the scope of government, how things actually get done. So I just wanted to say that I think if you look at what's been said, or Mr. Steinberg implied, what we're saying when we advocate for this position is we think that's the solution to some of the problems that we have. Obviously, as one of the speakers said, it's got to be done right. But there's a reason that affordable housing is not present. There's a reason that workforce housing is not present. We need to increase economic development if we're going to have a fair, equitable, and diverse community. As for where this came from, you have sitting before you here at this table 2 former chairs of the Comprehensive Planning Committee. I came across this idea earlier, as Mr. Steinberg did, in a different setting. Let me read to you. E2A, hire an economic development director. The town should create the permanent position of economic development director to work with the Chamber of Commerce, local merchants, professionals, farmers, tradesfolk, artisans, and government to foster and coordinate economic development efforts in Amherst. The master plan was probably the most intensively participatory process that we have had, and much more so than most communities have. The position is in the master plan. We support it. I hope you fund it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take just one more comment here before we move on, and again, we can come back to it in the general discussion. So yes, there, right on the aisle.
Rebecca Demling, Precinct 7. I'm voting against the motion before us. I am supporting the economic developer position in this next year's budget. As a parent of 3 kids in this town, I know one of the greatest difficulties of new families moving in is the tax burden associated with living here. We have an opportunity to reduce that tax burden by bringing in economic development by someone who is trained to do so. I also know that waiting will not reduce that tax burden on anyone. And I think having someone from the start of a new town-gown partnership makes a lot of sense in making sure that the financial aspects are well managed. Volunteers and community interest groups are not trained to bring development to town. They're trained to protect their interests. We need that financial interest protected as well. So I urge you to vote against it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to now move on to the other line items. As I said, we will come back in general discussion if there is any. So, town meeting finance committee portion of the budget. Any comment, questions? Finance department. Legal services. Human resources, human rights. See no hands, but if I missed something, somebody can yell. Information technology. Town clerk's office. Elections and registration. Nothing. Facilities maintenance. General services. Moving down to the appropriations, ambulance receipts, department receipts, penalties and interest from taxes, investment income. Nothing. Anything else on any of those other line items? Yes, in the back corner there.
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. I didn't notice a line item that has to do with payments from either the university or Amherst College for the services that are rendered by the town that are not fee for service things. In other words, we know they pay their water and sewer bills, that they pay for the ambulance service that the town provides. But I think it's pretty clear that at least some portion of the police department budget can be attributable to the on-campus student population. That that since the closing of Marks Meadow, there is no contribution for the elementary and secondary students who attend our schools from various university facilities that are not taxable, like North Village. Some small or large proportion, I know not, of the automobiles that are registered on campus for more than 6 months a year, which should be paying excise tax to the town, are not registered here. Now, I know that there are good personal economic reasons that many of us would like that not to happen, i.e. that their accidents may raise our auto insurance rates. But in the absence of those actual registrations, since this is the year where I understand from a precinct meeting from the finance director that the town's is going to renegotiate some of its agreements with the university, that perhaps some portion of that money related to excise tax could come from the university to assist us to keep up our roads, since it seems pretty clear to most of us that just floating bond issues and paying for it by property taxes is just not the way to go. So if somebody could explain to me where in this budget the university's contributions already are and what the town's negotiation posture is with regard to the items that I've mentioned and potentially other items related to the university's contribution, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Masanti?
Yeah, that reminds me of when I was in graduate school at UMass in the late 80s, interning at Amherst Town Hall. We went down to see Governor Dukakis's Administration and Finance Secretary and lobbied to change state law about how excise taxes are paid for all the reasons you said. And for the last 30 years, we've been unsuccessful in that effort. So that's a state law, fair or unfair. In terms of our relationship with the university, there is hundreds of thousands of dollars paid annually in support of our ambulance services. And on top of that, over the past 3 years, there's been additional monies allocated by the university to assist us to have as many as 5 ambulances on the road on weekend evenings during the academic year. I can tell you as recently as March 7th, the university contributed significant funds to assist our efforts with mutual aid in terms of police coverage to keep the town peaceful on that weekend. The relationship with the university is strong and I think getting stronger. We are in the midst of additional discussions about successor agreements to our existing partnership agreements. And economic development is one of many such areas that we're looking at.
Thank you. I'm now going to open things up to general discussion. And just a reminder again, when we do come to a vote, we will first come to vote on the larger amount, which is the Finance Committee amount, which is the full funding in the budget. If that fails, we would vote on the lower amount, the Burkhardt Amendment, which takes away funding for the economic development position. Yes, there in the fourth row.
Gordon Freed, Precinct 6. I'm sorry if I missed my chance to ask about the legal services. It's significantly less than in previous years, and I know that there are ongoing things and then there are surprises. Does this take into account surprises?
Mr. Masanti?
Surprises within reason. I know that, for example, fiscal 12 was a surprise year, a bigger surprise year. But in the current year with the existing funds, and that's what's recommended for the coming year, we fully expect to stay within the $110,000 that was appropriated for legal services. So we're comfortable with the recommended number.
Is there further discussion? Yes, right here in the front row.
Carol Gray, Precinct 7. I would urge people to vote no on the higher amount and yes on the lower amount. And I therefore support not funding the Economic Development Director for the cost of $85,000. And that's for several reasons. One is that I was very pleased that town meeting showing a consensus evolving in the town about caring for social services and for providing services for low-income residents. We appropriated an additional $105,000 on Monday, and to be careful with our budget, we can make sure that only $20,000 of that comes out of reserves if we do not fund this additional position. So in other words, 105 minus 85, this is very good for our budget. We don't come out over budget very much. A second thing is that it seems we're doing well, even without an economic development director. We've got a AA+++++ rating, which I think is, I'm adding too many pluses, but that's commending the people, the town manager and our finance director. We are almost at 13% of the 15% we want to get to in reserves. That's very good. We're adding 2 new police officers. We're adding some other positions. We're talking about adding a clinic in the bottom of the Bang Center. That's all very good. And I also think, what could that money go for in future years? That same position could fund 4 Cambodian outreach workers. It could fund 2 teachers. It could fully fund language programs for the entire 7th grade instead of just half the 7th grade, which is what we have now. And aren't those things that we care about? It's things that I certainly care about. I also worry that sometimes economic development people go in directions that we don't necessarily like. For example, the 5-story buildings in the middle of downtown. For example, the Patterson project several years ago. And also there's ways to save money. For example, we have a big tax break coming up for developers that will cost the town hundreds of thousands in taxes if we approve it. We can save money by not giving big tax breaks to developers.
You're straying off topic a bit here, so let's try and...
No, it's actually very related because it's about...
Let's try and bring it in.
It's about saving money, and this is all about having an economically sustainable town. It's completely on topic. Other ways to save money are, we have one of the largest planning departments in the whole area. Some of those salaries are in the $100,000 range.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt you for a point of order.
I'm sorry, the clock was stopped.
Yes, could we get the clock working?
I wouldn't want
Was
to
it
keep you past
flashing
3.
red, or was it just stopped? I didn't notice it. Yes. Why don't you finish up this sentence, because you've already gone over on your time. Thank you.
Well, you could start the clock. Thank you. So
You've got 1 sentence left, okay? Excuse me. I noted what time Ms. Gray started, which was 8:05. So it's already been over 3 minutes. So even with the interruptions, she's already had her 3 minutes. I'm giving her 1 more sentence. You may proceed.
I would encourage that we have an even-handed debate, and the 4 speakers before were all in a row against this amendment, so I'd urge you to have more speakers that are in favor of this amendment and then to alternate speakers. And please vote no on the higher amount and yes on the lower amount. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Yes, from the end of the table on the Finance Committee.
Kay Moran, Chair of the Finance Committee. Over the past 3 weeks, I've had to drive to and from Boston several times and passing closed mills and decayed housing in Bondsville, Three Rivers, and the Thorndike sections of Palmer. 8% of Palmer's population is below the poverty line. Palmer's only significant economic development project in many years is a new Palmer Motorsports Park, which is a road race course. Bondsville, Three Rivers, and Thorndike could obviously use more economic development, and so could Amherst. Like other town officials, town meeting members would really love to spend more money on services for Amherst residents. To do that will require more revenue than we're getting now. State aid is unreliable. In January, the state actually took back some of the aid that we had been counting on. Reserves aren't revenue. You can only spend them once, and when you do, they're gone. A few years ago, town meeting authorized the collection of hotel, motel, meals, and excise taxes from businesses. They will produce about $770,000 in the current fiscal year, an amount that's expected to grow in subsequent years. That's because of economic development. The big bucks come from the property tax, which provides, as you saw earlier in town meeting, 56% of Amherst revenue. For the current fiscal year, the base property tax levy plus the allowable 2.5% increase is $44,120,948. But on top of that, we expect additional property tax of $700,000 on new construction that wasn't there to be taxed last year. That's called new growth. That new growth adds to the tax base and will produce $700,000 about year after year. New growth comes from economic development. Without that new growth and the hotel meals tax revenue, we would have $1,470,000 less to spend this year, right now. And again, next year, we wouldn't have it, and the year after that. We need someone in town hall whose job it is to spur economic development that fits Amherst and can bring in additional tax revenue to pay for all the many things we want and expect the town to do.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Yes, second row right in the front here.
John Hornick, Precinct 7. I am persuaded by the need for new revenues for the town. As a number of people have said, we absolutely do need a broader tax base so that we can do more of the things that we want to do now and other things that will come up in the future. On the other hand, I have to say I'm also somewhat sympathetic to people who are skeptical about whether this position would work. So what would help me is if someone could tell me that there's somewhere out in this country where there's a major university, is it Boulder or somewhere else, where a town has appointed an economic development director, has undertaken this kind of an enterprise, and done it successfully, so that there's a model out there that we can follow. Thank you.
Mr. Musante.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. And the emphatic answer to that is absolutely. We're not breaking new ground here in Amherst, Mass. We are attempting to put in place what has worked remarkably well in a number of college towns across the country, Boulder being one of them, College Park, Maryland, Princeton, New Jersey, the neighborhoods around the University of Pennsylvania, and there's many others. A number of them were highlighted most recently in the town gown study, but there are other examples. Our neighboring communities, Northampton, Greenfield, and elsewhere, a key position in the town government, city government, is an economic development professional person to assist. This is such an opportunity. I can't urge town meeting strongly enough to seize the opportunity and support the proposed budget that includes the economic development director funding. We identified, again, most recently in the town gown study, but going back to the master plan, what are the town's objectives? Vibrant downtown, strong village centers, diverse and affordable housing supply, preserving character in neighborhoods and open space, and local employment opportunities, and an increased tax base to pay for the services that we want and need and expect, including what we talked about the other night. The university, as a college town, the university generates, I think in 2013, $194 million in research activity. The overwhelming majority of that is happening within the property limits of the campus. There are opportunities to leverage that investment out into the community. There's been a desire expressed to have young people stay in Amherst, raise their families here, grow their business, and be happy here. There are opportunities to have spin-off businesses in the downtown and in our village centers, and the economic development professional would be working in collaboration with the community to help strengthen all of our village centers all over town. One recent example is Mass Mutual is making a major investment in our downtown, hiring the best and brightest coming out of the colleges in research and development positions. They'll be working, and some of them will be living in our downtown in some of the new spaces that are being created in the north end of downtown. That's the type of economic development I think we want to have strengthen our downtown, grow our tax base, and reduce tax burden for the rest of us in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for new hands. See one back center there, third from the back.
Elisa Rubenstein, Precinct 10. I basically am in favor of an economic development director, but I'm coming at it from a different angle. Is at the precinct meeting, I learned that how are we funding the $85,000 salary is that it's based on some extra money that was a result of savings when retirees or town employees chose an HMO health plan instead of a PPO. So we've talked about OPEB and worry about that huge ballooning cost, and here we're directing money entirely out of that healthcare section into an economic development director. So I'm wondering in the future, next year, what if more people don't choose HMOs? Where's this money going to come from? The way the money is being generated bothers me. So I'd like some explanation of that.
Mr. Masanti.
We've talked for a number of years about the progress we've made to contain healthcare costs for both employees and retirees. And that's reflected in the budget that I hope you're about to adopt. That includes the healthcare budget. It's actually smaller next year than the current year. That's from plan design changes and other things that have saved millions of dollars in just the last 6 or 7 years. And that gets compounded over the next 40 years. And that OPEB number would be substantially larger if it weren't for that. So we're not taking money away from the healthcare account to fund this position. The fact that the healthcare account doesn't need as much money to fund its obligations is helping us to fund this. We've also taken a number of strides overall to get our fiscal house in order in this town over the past 5 or 6 years. The recommended budget, including this position, is only growing by 2.5%. And that's in large part because we've been able to contain the health care costs. The other way to sustain the position going forward is the economic development activity in keeping with the town's stated values in the master plan and elsewhere to generate tax base, to generate new revenue, to help sustain that position and reduce the tax burden for others.
Thank you. We've been talking for 45 minutes. We might think about coming to a vote soon. Yes, over here in the corner.
James Barat, Precinct 1. UMass is currently building a new building at their University Park off of Maple Avenue. They have their own economic development person. So we're going to be competing with a tax-free organization to try and get people to locate in Amherst. This position has to pay for itself. Do we really think that this person is going to be able to bring in $160,000 a year? I don't.
Way down in the corner there.
Seems to me we already have.
I'm sorry, identify yourself,
Oh,
please.
sorry, Dick Bentley, Precinct 10. It seems to me we already have an economic developer in Amherst. In fact, we've got several. We have Jonathan Tucker in the Planning Department. We have Sarah LaCour in the Business Improvement District. This seems to me to be a real slap in the face to both Mr. Tucker and Ms. LaCour, who, as far as we know, are doing a pretty good job.
Yes, fourth row back right in the center there.
Claire Bertrand, Precinct 8. Years ago, when the community was seeing the sprawl that is happening across the country, a value that our town had was to preserve open space. And Pete Westover stood as a stalwart defender of open space. Today, David Zomek has that position in part. It's called Planning and Development Director. Is that right? Conservation and Development Director. Kind of odd, similar to what the previous speaker said. We want to preserve and we want to grow. A community like Amherst has done a wonderful job of preserving open space. And we have done some good growth, but we could do better. I'm not at the university. I'm in South Amherst. We are seeing a little bit of growth there. But what we need to do is fill in and bring in and strengthen what we already have. So investing in somebody who is a professional and who can reach out to the broader world outside of our lovely borders to bring in stronger business, to help grow stronger businesses that are already here. Those are good things, and I think it's a value that we want to support all all our schools and all our open space. I think we also want to strengthen our economic strength, our sustainability as well. So I'll be voting in support of the higher amount.
Right on the way back of the back row there. There you go.
Sean Burke, Precinct 2. I'm going to support the Burkhart proposal, and the reason is that the suggestion to have the developer or development director was brought around by the town gown thing, and they're still, as far as I understand, still voting more committees to, we're loaded with committees here, and there's yet another committee that's going to come up with something, and I don't understand why we have to jump ahead and try to appoint somebody, and then one of the other speakers pointed out that UMass already has a development director, and are we going to double shotgun this thing here and then have two guys working against each other or opposed to each other, whatever the situation might be? And for another few months, the select board already pointed out that they've been talking about this since 2008 or 9 or something. So clearly nobody popped up in the radar right away to get something done here, and to jump on it now when we could probably vote on it as a group later on, maybe in the fall, when everything's in order, instead of trying to jump ahead. I don't see it happening. So I vote for the lower.
Thank you. Right there, third in from the aisle. Yes.
Abby Jensen, Precinct 4. I call the previous question.
Motion for the previous question has been made and seconded, which we will now come to an immediate vote on the previous question. If 2/3 of you vote yes, we will then come to a vote on Article 11C. 11, not C, no one knows C. Article 11, general government section, the higher amount first. But first we're voting on the motion for the previous question to end debate. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Moderator hears 2/3. I hear people doubt. We will have a standing vote. Tellers, please come forward so I can make sure you're all here. Sure, I'll listen again. Okay, everybody in a well-modulated voice. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Moderator still hears 2/3. Is there still someone who doubts it? Is there a doubt? Okay, so we will have a standing vote. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I have all 6 tellers? Yes. Okay. Tellers, you have your sections planned out. You know what you're doing. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please rise and stay standing. If you can't rise, please raise your hand high. On the left, there were 43 yes votes. In the center, there are 32 yes votes. On the right, there were 40 yes votes. All those who are standing may be seated. All those voting against the motion for the previous question, please rise. On the right, there are 15 no votes. On the left, there are 17 no votes. So here's the way I do it. So the no must be less than or equal to this amount for 2/3 to pass.
Oh, is that how you do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a little different calculation.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of phrasing it. I'm sorry? 20. In the center, there are 28 no votes. Have it. Did I add it wrong? We have 115 votes in favor, 16 votes opposed. The motion to the previous question did not get 2/3, so we continue with debate. I'm sorry. We have 115 yes votes and 60 no votes. So the motion for the previous question did not pass because it is not 2/3. So the conversation continues. Do we have more speakers? Yes, third row in from the back and one in from the aisle, right there.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, before you begin. So I have a note here from somebody saying it's difficult to concentrate due to comments from members between themselves. I'd like to remind members to please comment either a whisper, actually, to refrain from commenting. If anybody else can hear it, then you're being just a little bit rude and distracting. So you really need to be quiet so people can pay attention to the speakers. Thank you. You may continue now.
Thank you. My name is Janet McGowan, and I am from Precinct 8. And I want to talk about this a bit, hopefully quickly, to give, I didn't have a clear opinion about this. I sort of went back and forth on it. You know, economic development is good. The town needs more taxes and revenue, and people need jobs. That's clear from living where we live and the communities around us. I was at a baseball game coming home with a very close relative who happened to have done economic development studies for cities and towns in New England for 5 years. And I laid the problem out to him, and he said, well, what kind of development does Amherst want? And that before you can make that decision, you have to figure out your economy, the strengths, the weaknesses, look at the surrounding communities. This is what these consulting groups do, and they can figure out your next steps. Like what kind, do you want an arts economy? Do you want it to be a research economy? Do you want to focus on tourism because we have a lot of open, buildings in the summer? And then you can direct the strategy of how to get to there. How do you get to that development? And I hate to recommend another study, but in this case, it feels a little cart before the horse to me that we don't really know what kind of development we want to aim for. And so, that's, I think where I'm landing, and I'm actually interested in hearing people's comments, is let's do the study, let's figure out what our economy is, let's look at the opportunities, look at the strategies. It might be UMass partnering with us, paying for half a position. It might be gap funding. It might be getting, federal funding for certain things. But where are we going, and is really the question, and what is this person supposed to do, and what development do we want that will really fit our community? So I just want to offer those thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, way in the back in the aisle there.
Hi, Isaac Benezer, the Section 8. Section 8. I've been out of it for a while, so don't be surprised by anything I say tonight. I think this original motion really has a future. I think it would get more than 2/3 if the committee had an opportunity to finish their business and come up with a recommendation. I could foresee our sending our representatives to this committee and saying, look, we think it's important as a town that we had a majority, not 2/3, but an overwhelming majority who would support the 80,000 or whatever it was. And I think what we ought to do is try to get matching money, but don't stop with UMass. I think we need partners for this. Let's go big, because 85,000 won't buy you a hut in the pen.
Thank you. We have been discussing this for an hour, just to let people know that. Yes, on the aisle right here.
Kittenthar Precinct 1. My question is, who's hiring this person? Because I think that makes a lot of difference. I think part of what we have here is a lack of trust in some ways about who's going to be directing this, what the direction of this person will be. You know, if it is direction, the way that Mr. Musanti pointed out, that's you know, and direction in what we've come together with over years of planning for the town. You know, that's one thing. If it's just somebody that's being hired that's good at getting businesses in and doesn't really pay too much attention to the effects of the town, then that's another thing.
Mr. Musanti.
Yeah, we placed on the back table tonight a complete job description for the position. This position would be a direct report to myself as town manager. I would be the hiring authority. And so the direction as laid out to me by the select board is to pursue the objectives laid out in the master plan and that we've been talking about tonight. It's a direct report to me. It's not a planning department employee in more the regulatory area. It's a direct report to the town manager, working with the chief administrative officer, working on village centers, downtown collaborations, not in isolation, not in competition, but in collaboration with community, collaboration with the campuses, collaboration with the business community to bring this to life. And we've got a lot of studies all talking about leveraging research and development, leveraging arts and culture, a number of other things, startups, incubator space, maker space. Some of it is beginning to happen. It needs help from a professional who's trained in this area to help us get there in the values that we're espousing, I think, together as a community. And I don't think waiting is a wise strategy at all.
Yes, second row on the aisle right there.
Bob Grady, Precinct 10. I think I'm still convinced by Mr. Karlstrom's comments.
Hold that mic real close to your mouth.
I understand we all want development to happen, but I just think, given the environment of the way things have been over the past year, I think it'll be a much stronger support for this position if it comes from a broader coalition of folks. And I don't want the select board or the town manager to take this in any negative sense. Just that we really feel it will be better for the town, it will happen soon, and it will be more representative of the town. I think it has a far greater chance of success, and that's the reason I'm going to support the lower number. Not from a negative point of view, but from a very positive point of view.
Yes, third row from the back, right in the middle there. Yes, you.
I'll come from this side.
Siobhan Best, Precinct 9. So I'm going to be voting for the lower amount because I really feel like going back to what Rolf Karlstrom said. He was a member of the steering committee, the Town Gown Steering Committee, and it seems to me that that's an ongoing process. And it seems to me that we need to really respect the work of that town gown steering process with UMass and the town before we make any decisions that could be $85,000 heavy. Thanks.
Thinking about coming to a vote, perhaps? I still see a lot of hands. Way in the back row there.
Mike Giles, Precinct 4. I just wanted to talk to a few of the things that I've heard. I'll be voting for the larger amount in support of having an economic development director. It's a position we've talked about for many, many years for people who've been on town meeting for a while. This isn't a position that came out of this new town gown committee. I think someone referenced a 2008 meeting where we were talking about this position. These positions have been in other towns all over the state, all over the country. And I think we actually started all this off talking about how the town has kind of two pillars of support, the UMass and our residential tax base. And I think the person said that we're doing real well with that. Personally, I think that's not a great position for the town to be in. I think we need a lot broader base than we currently have, dependent on this major university and our residential tax base. And that's a large part of what this role would play, is creating these wins. As Kay Moran pointed out, you can bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, recurring revenue, year after year after year through economic development. And that type of change across town really moves the needle for all of the things that we all do care about, whether it's community services or affordable housing or any number of the things that we care about. So this role has a huge amount of leverage that you just don't see in nearly any other role within town. Yes, it's $85,000, but anyone who's going to be successful and is going to maintain their job as an economic development director is going to bring in far more money than their salary costs us as the town. And if they don't, then I trust very well that the people who are running our town, who we celebrate as keeping us in A+++ bond rating, who are very knowledgeable and have done a wonderful job fiscally, will not let this person continue, because that is ultimately their job. They're being paid to bring in large amounts of new revenue in ways that feel correct with the values of our town. And in response to the kind of town gown committee and the need for further study, we have a master plan. We have a very comprehensive master plan with a hugely inclusive process, for those of you who remember how that came together. And this is one of the recommendations of that, along with all the values that it laid out for the town of Amherst in a really clear, meaningful way about our village centers and about the type of development we want and the type of jobs we want and we have all of these things laid out in very inclusive processes. And so this is finally a chance to actually take some broader action on those things that we've put together. So I'm going to vote for the larger amount in support for the ongoing health of our town.
Let's see. Third row right in the center there.
Pam Rooney, Precinct 9. I'm going to support the position for an economic developer. I look around the room and I see many, many, many people who have volunteered hours and effort to better this town. Frankly, I'd like to see something happen on this topic. We have been talking about it since whatever ancient history here, and it takes a body, it takes a position whose full-time job it is to do this effort, to round up the people, to hold the consensus meetings, to work actively all the time on this topic. And I don't see anybody here who is in a position to be able to do that, because most people here already have full-time positions and responsibilities. And I would just urge people to really think that if we want to get off the dime, maybe it's the time to act instead of talk. Thank you.
Thanks. Hoping we can come to a vote soon. Way in the back center there. Microphone.
Tracy Lee Bouchelier, Precinct 6. I would say, just noticing that with part of this job description and hearing some of the discussion, the, some of the goals are to bring in opportunities for more businesses into our area, or I guess primary goal for the Economic Development Director. In number 3, in the essential functions on the handout that was on the back table, that lists the job description, it talks about, towards the last sentence of number 3, creating more opportunities for local restaurants. And I'll just take that as, to jump off of that, we've lost a few restaurants within the center of town. We have turnover, and I think I would call it a high turnover on restaurants. We had some great restaurants that are here, but we do see a change. So if we're looking at an economic development director coming in, I think I would support more study. Again, what a previous town meeting member stated in terms of looking at, well, what are we wanting to develop? How are we wanting to develop before we bring that person in so we know where to focus it? Because, you know, the businesses that we've lost, if we think about the businesses we lost downtown Amherst, a lot of them are leaving due to high rents. And, you know, I'm just thinking of one clothing store that lost visibility because of a location change. So it's not just about bringing businesses in. Can we sustain those businesses? Can they afford to stay here once they're here? So I think there's more information that we need to have and to be able to provide. One, to see definitely the direction that we want to go in, but how are we going to help these businesses stay and not just come in and then leave in a couple of years? Thank you.
Yes, right there with the laptop. Wait for the microphone. Raise your hand. And if you're able to, I would ask speakers to rise when they're recognized. If you can't rise, that's okay. But if you can, it's helpful to everybody else to see who's speaking.
Nina Wishengrad, Precinct 5. Through the miracle of modern technology, I just wanted to answer a question that was asked earlier. Are there economic developers in other towns? The answer is resoundingly yes. There are several articles, one out of the University of North Carolina called Small Towns, Big Ideas, one out of Cornell called The Blending of Communities, Town and Gown Relationships at Colleges, and I could go on, but I won't. But an economic developer is not merely about bringing business in. We have to not think of this as building big monolithic skyscraper office buildings. It's not what it's about, and it does include what Tracy just spoke to. It is a professional position that in fact would look not only about the kind of businesses we need, but also how to sustain them. Thank you.
Yes, second row right there. Motion of the previous question has been made and seconded. So once again, we will come to an immediate vote. If 2/3 of you vote yes, we will come to a vote on the motions before us and debate. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Moderator hears 2/3. So we have two numbers in front of us here, which you can see on the screen. The larger amount is the $6,483,937 Finance Committee amount. That's the number we're voting on first. If that passes, we're done. If that fails, we then vote on the smaller amounts. All those in favor of the Finance Committee motion for the larger amount, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. The ayes have it. Okay. I see 15 hands. We will have a tally vote. Tellers, please come forward. I'd ask for a moment of silence so I can give instructions. We are using tally card. Quiet, please. Stop tearing your sheets just for a second so we have fewer mistakes later on. Tally card number 2 If you got a blank card, make sure your name is on it. You will pass your cards over to the aisle where your tellers are. You must remain in your seats until your row has been collected and released. Okay, you may proceed. We're voting yes or no on the larger amount. A green card means in favor of the larger amount. Red card opposed. Okay, but you'll remember it next time, right? Yes. Okay. Just a reminder again, it is tally card number 2, okay? So you might probably all passed them in by now, but we're just doing the reminder again because some people managed to get it wrong. Thank you. total yes votes are 99. The total no votes are 88. So the motion passes with the higher amount. And we are moving on to debt service. I call on Mr. Braun to make a motion. No, who's making the motion this time? Mr. Kubiak? I have to. Ms. Tileman?
No.
Quiet, please.
I move that the town appropriate $2,264,807 for the payment of the town's general fund indebtedness, and to meet such appropriation of $1,943,270 be raised by taxation, and $321,537 be appropriated and transferred from Community Preservation Fund annual revenues. Mr. Moderator, Mr. Sharma will give the statement for the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Did I hear a second on that motion? Okay, you may speak to the motion.
The Finance Committee voted 6-0 for this article. This actually, I'm going to say a couple of things about this, because this is a good opportunity to take stock of one important aspect of the town's financial situation. While Amherst is many things to many people, from Finance Committee's point of view, the town is also a financial entity. This means that we are a dot in the vast network/infrastructure external to us and with which we interact as a matter of routine. Of special significance is our interaction with the municipal bond markets. That is because, as do other financial entities, we go periodically to the bond markets to borrow monies that help sustain our operations. So how much do we rely on the municipal bond markets? As of March 2015, total outstanding debt was $19.3 million, up from $19.2 million in March of 2014, a 0.5% increase versus property tax change of 3.7% and general fund increase of 2.9%. So the increase in debt was fairly minimal. All of our debt is bond debt, with bonds maturing between 3 and 20 years. The town does not have bank debt or lines of credit. We do not have risky instruments such as derivatives. State law limits the town to a narrow range of debt instruments. S&P rates our bonds at AA+, which means that we continue to have ready and low-cost access to the municipal bond markets. As evidence of that, in February 2015, the town issued $1.9 million in new debt at an average rate, the true interest cost, of 1.43%. Of the $19.3 million in debt that we have, that's in relation to $72 million of projected budget for FY16. A little more than half of our debt is general fund debt. Less than a quarter is water fund debt. Less than a quarter is sewer fund debt. Then we have very little regional school debt and transportation fund debt in this article. The big items are road, $3.5 million are associated with roads, which is about 18% of total debt, and rolling green preservation unit, $1.25 million, which is 6% of the total debt. This brings us to debt service, which is about $2.3 million of principal and interest payments projected for next year. It's just under 5% of projected property taxes for FY16. That is, property taxes are about 20 times the expected debt service. So the town's debt load is reasonable and manageable. Here are some other main things to remember about the debt service. Road construction and maintenance account for 29% of total debt service. School-related renovations account for 24% of total debt service. Renovations to the town hall, 9%. The CPF funds played a significant role in debt service for recreation, Hawthorne, housing, Rolling Green, Ann Whalen, Housing Authority, and Land Acquisition, Southeast Street, and Town Hall. No debt service is projected for the libraries for next year. I'd like to close by saying that the town manager and finance director and their staff manage the finances of the town with a great deal of finesse and discipline, yet financial structures are fragile and subject to getting into trouble very rapidly. For instance, we are currently living in a very low interest rate environment. We recently issued just under $2 million at the rate of 1.43%. If the rates were to rise significantly, as they did in living memory back in the 1970s, or if we had a sustained economic downturn, financial situation can change very rapidly. It is important, therefore, that we not lose sight of the continuing need for financial discipline in managing our town. While we may differ on specifics about this and that, it is in our collective interest for the town to continue smart and steady growth while keeping a sharp eye on costs and expenses. Thank you.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion, and this requires a majority. If you look in your Finance Committee report, we are on page 28. I am not going to go through line item by line item on this one. I think it'll take more time than just opening it up to discussion. So do we have discussion on anything under this portion of the budget? Yes, second in from the aisle there.
Pat Church, Precinct 5. I have a request. I know that I remember some of the different items that have gone into the indebtedness. Would it be possible next to each one to perhaps put the year that they are going to end? I just think that would be a useful reminder for a town meeting about how long these do last and how long we pay some of these. And not for this year, maybe, but for the next time.
Yes, Mr. Slaughter.
I would direct you to page 68 in the Finance Committee book. It doesn't have the entire schedule for all of them because some of the debt terms are longer than what's shown on the page, but certainly those that are expiring in the next about 6 years are on there, so you have a sense of how long some of them are going to run. That'll help a little bit, at least in the short term.
Thank you. Yes, in the back corner there.
If I could ask the presenter from the...
Identify yourself, please.
Vince O'Connor, Precinct 1. If I could ask the presenter from the Finance Committee if he has this information. One, are any of our... any of the debt that we've taken out a variable rate, or is it all fixed rate? And the second question is, could you break down the different amounts for principal and interest that we're paying, and perhaps give us a shot at explaining what the difference, our bond rating is A++, as I recall from the previous session of town meeting. If we went to A+, what would the difference be in the interest rates, and how much money would it cost us? It's all so abstract that it would be helpful to have numbers attached to those things.
Sharma?
I think the clearer answer will probably be forthcoming from Mr. Pooler. I can just say I suspect that they are fixed rates, but I would defer to Mr. Pooler to explain the details about this.
Mr. Pooler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, all of our debt is fixed rate. That is a mandate by state law. We're only able to issue fixed rate debt. The other question was, and I have to look up what the difference between interest and principal, so that will just take 1 second. And what was the third question? What's the difference in the amount that we're paying? So It sort of depends on what the general rate environment is. We're in a very low interest rate environment, as you all know. I'm sure you see that on your bank accounts and so forth. So these days, the difference between a AAA, which would be the highest, or a AA plus, which we are, or an A plus, is probably a fraction of a percentage. So maybe 0.2%. When things were back a few years ago, when interest rates were higher, 5-10 years ago, it was probably as much as 0.5%. So it varies depending on what the rate environment is. And I know where I'll find it. If you just give me 1 second, I will tell you for sure what the interest in principal is. There we go.
Page 115 of the budget book, apparently. If you have the answer, you can.
That's a little out of date, but that's fine. Mr. Moderator, if I could, these are generally right, but they were changed a little bit when we sold the debt. But the general idea is, if you look at page 115 of the town manager's budget, there are $2,142,413 in principal and $368,455 in interest.
Thank you. Any other questions? We ready to come to a vote? I see a hand there on the aisle.
I'm looking at the...
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, Hilda Greenbaum, Precinct 1. I'm looking at the line item for Banks Community Center roof and HVAC, and there seems to be a lot of variability from FY12, and then it goes down in 14, and then all of a sudden it's going up again by the amount of $16,970. Will somebody explain what's going on there?
Mr. Pooler.
So when we sell debt, generally what happens is it goes down every year. Sometimes when we sell debt, there is, the way it's structured, occasionally there is a big payment at the end. I would have to look, so that's a general answer. I would have to look specifically to see why that particular one went up, and I would be glad to report back to you at a later date about why that happened.
Thank you. I see no other hands, so we are ready to come to a vote. And this is on the debt service, and it requires a majority. The motion is before us on the screen. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Ayes have it unanimously. We move on to Public Works, and I call on someone on the Finance Committee to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town raise and appropriate $2,162,004 for Public Works.
Motion has been made and seconded. You may speak to your motion.
So I think everybody knows that Public Works is probably the department that most people in town touch most or are affected by most every day. Anybody who rode a bike tonight or walked or drove, when you turn on your faucet, when you flush your toilet, it's all Public Works. And so these are really kind of nuts and bolts of the town, really. And so let me just give you a quick survey of, again, details on page 29 of your Finance Committee report. The overall budget is an increase of a little more than 4%. Even though the department is basically level funded in terms of number of employees, the proposed increase covers previously negotiated employee collective bargaining settlements, and there is an addition of a 0.68 full-time employee administrative assistant. That's going to be shared with the water and sewer funds, and this person is going to help DPW analyze productivity and work effectiveness and design better ways for the department to help customers, meaning you, with their questions and service requests. So this is going to be a really good, I think, we all think, addition to a difficult job. Public Works gets a lot of calls from a lot of people, and so this is going to help improve the efficiency of the responsiveness. All other areas of the department are level funded. So again, the Finance Committee voted 6-0 with one absent in favor of this, and we hope you do too.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion, and it requires a majority. The line items are on page 29 of the Finance Committee report. Any questions, comments on Public Works Administration? I see no hands there. How about Highway? I see no hands. Snow and ice removal. There wasn't any snow this winter, was there? Yes, the third row there.
Alice Swift, Precinct 7. I'm curious to know how much we spent on snow and ice removal, because what was budgeted was so much less than we spent last year, and yet we're budgeting the same amount for next year. And you may think that with climate change that it will switch back and forth, and next year it'll be warm, but we really don't know.
Anybody? Mr. Pooler, or?
We will spend about twice the budgeted amount this year. So another $250-some-odd-thousand.
Other questions on snow and ice removal? It is all gone, which is a good thing. Street and traffic lights, equipment maintenance, and tree and grounds maintenance. Any questions on any of the sources of funds line items? Any further discussion? Are we ready to come to a vote? I see no hands. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion before you for the Public Works portion of the budget, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Moderator hears a unanimous vote. Ayes have it. We now move on to the Water Fund. And Ms. Tileman, would you please make a motion?
I move that the town appropriate $3,731,688 for the Water Fund, and that to meet such appropriation, $3,731,688 be made available from Water Fund revenues of the current year.
Motion has been made and seconded. And who's speaking to this one? Mr. Sharma, would you please speak to the motion?
The Water Fund, as you know, is supposed to be self-funding, funded largely through revenues from user fees. As you can see in the report, there was a minor decrease because of a reduction in OPEB payment and capital expenditures, offsetting an increase of just over 1 FTE. Small increase of 10 cents per 100 cubic feet to $3.35 per 100 cubic feet, which remains below state and regional levels. No Water Fund balance funds were used to support the FY16 operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion. Vote requirement is a majority. The Water Fund is on page 31 of the Finance Committee report, and I'm just opening this up to general discussion. Any questions on the Water Fund? I see a hand way over there against the wall.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Bursat, Precinct 6. I just have a question, and I don't mean this to be frivolous, but can you tell us what actually goes into the operating budget, since the water just kind of flows in and we have pipes and all that sort of thing? I'm just curious because it's over $3 million. Thank you.
I see Mr. Mooring lurking in the back there. Would you like to come forward? Tell us what happens with our water.
So Guilford Mooring, Superintendent of Public Works. So that big number is made up of a lot of things. First, we have to pay taxes. We pay taxes to the land we own in Pelham and Shrewsbury for our water reservoirs. Then we have to treat the water and we have to pump the water. So we pay a lot of electricity. We pay a lot of maintenance costs in our plants. We actually have 3 water plants. We have the Atkins plant, the Centennial plant, and the baby carriage plant. We also have 5 wells. Well, 4 goes with baby carriage, the baby carriage plant, and then we have the other wells. So all that, we pay for the wells, we pay for the maintenance of the wells, we pay for the power to run those. Then we pay for the pipes to get it from the wells to the roads and then your service. So we have hydrants, valves, piping, and we pay for all that and replacement and repair of all that. Then we have miscellaneous training. All of our employees have to be certified to either be DEP certified in drinking water or into treatment. So we have to pay training for them. We have to pay their certification hours and recertification hours. And then there's just general cost of vehicles to travel and so forth. So it's a lot of stuff. There's roughly 12 employees. I think we're adding an extra one this year to go to the treatment side, and that's what makes up the operating side of the budget.
Thank you. Anything else before we come to vote? Yes, I see a hand there in the aisle. Right. Yes.
Mary Wentworth, Precinct 5. I wonder if Mr. Mooring could tell us the source for the purchase of the fluoride that he supervises added to our water supply, and what the cost for that is. Thank you.
Mr. Mooring, can you speak to this?
Amy Rizecki, the Assistant Superintendent of Public Works, is in the back of the room flashing me my cue cards. We get our fluoride from a company called Univar. They're an American company, but the material actually does come from China. It passes all of the requirements of the American Water Works standards and DEP standards before we put it in. And it costs 12 cents. Oh, it's 12 grand annually. It's very inexpensive per pound. It's like 12 cents per pound is what it kind of comes out to be.
Thank you. Further discussion on water fund? Yes, front row over there.
Denise Barbarette, Precinct 9, and I wonder if somebody could explain what this sentence means to me. It's on page 31 of the Finance Committee report. Toward the bottom, it says, this contribution to the OPEB trust fund was reduced to $79,000 from $150,000 based on the most recent actuarial study of the town's OPEB liability.
Mr. Moore, I'm sorry, Mr. Pooler.
As you heard Monday night, every 2 years we do a study from an actuary of how much we would need to pay into our OPEB liability trust in order to basically pay off that liability over a 30-year period. That's called the ARC, the Annual Required Contribution. And according to the study, if we were meeting the full ARC, the amount that we would need to put aside is $79,000. So that's the amount that we should be putting aside. And as I explained the other day, the more aggressively we put money in other words, if we meet the ARC, over the long run, we can use a higher interest rate, and so it really does reduce our liability much more. So by hitting the ARC, we were able to go from a guesstimate from a couple of years ago of $150,000 to the exact amount using a higher interest rate, and that's why the number is lower.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? I see no hands, so we're ready to come to a vote on the water fund. The motion is on the screen before you. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor on the motion for the water fund, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. I hear unanimous vote. We now move on to the sewer fund. Ms. Tileman to make a motion.
I move that the town appropriate $3,857,510 for the sewer fund, and that to meet such appropriation, $3,857,510 be made available from sewer fund revenues of the current year. And Mr. Sharma will speak to for the Finance Committee.
And do I hear a second? Did I hear a second? Yes, okay. Mr. Sharma.
Sewer fund also, as you know, is self-funding. Minor increase in this because of salary steps and COLAs includes about $150,000 to OPEB, minor increase of 0.15 FTE. There was a small increase of 10 cents per 100 cubic feet in the rate to $3.75 per 100 cubic feet, implying an increase of $12 per year for average four-person household. Thank you.
And I assume Finance Committee recommends this?
Yes, the vote for the Finance Committee was 6-0.
Thank you. And as previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion. This is another majority vote. The Finance Committee report is on page 32. And is there any discussion before we come to a vote? Yes, front row center over there.
Rob Kestner, Precinct 3. The previous fund, the water fund, employs approximately the same number, I think 18 or 19 employees as the sewer fund does. And the OPEB amount for the sewer fund is still listed at $150,000. Presumably the health of the retirees in both is comparable. I'm just curious, Mr. Pooler explained why the water fund employees had such a lower actuarial expectation for the OPEB, but it's not consistent across funds. And so I'm curious how that could be. Thank you.
Mr. Pooler.
In the sewer fund, I kept the appropriation at $150,000, frankly, to catch up a little bit with the sewer fund and get it caught up more than the water fund. If I had put $150 in the water fund, the water fund would have been out of balance this year. We needed to go down to the ARC amount in order to have a balanced fund and not have an extra increase in the water rates. So in order to keep consistent with the recommendation for the water rates that I knew was going forward, in the water fund, we hit the ARC. In the sewer fund, we had some extra room, given what we thought the revenues would be, so we changed that. I think in the future, you're likely to see the sewer fund OPEB contribution meet the ARC, because frankly, I think in the future we won't have that extra room in the rates that we did this year. Does that make sense?
Further discussion on the sewer fund. Do I see a hand there? Yes, Mr. Kusner.
Thank you for the explanation. It was really in the context of an earlier article where we saw the overall indebtedness or expected indebtedness from OPEB that surprised some of us that we're actually reducing the contribution to it rather than keeping it higher. And that's what was the puzzle, really. Thank you. If you can comment.
Mr. Pooler?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If we are funding at our ARC level, then that is what I think is a responsible way to try to reduce a big liability over time. It's like paying off your mortgage. You do it on a schedule over a long period of time because it is a big number. So I think on the water fund side, hitting that ARC is where we should be. We had a little more flexibility in the sewer side to go above that. I think that's probably an exceptional situation. I'm glad we're able to do it. It makes progress, and but again, I didn't think it was prudent to do that on the water fund because that would have required more increases in the water rate than I thought we should be recommending.
Further discussion before a vote? I see no hands, so we will come to a vote on the motion before us for the sewer fund. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. I hear yes vote. We now move on to the Solid Waste Fund. Yes, do I have a motion from the Finance Committee?
I move that the town appropriate $474,298 for the Solid Waste Fund, and that to meet such appropriation, $474,298 be made available from Solid Waste Fund revenues of the current year. And Mr. Sharma will speak to this for the Finance Committee.
Okay, do I hear a second? Yes, Mr. Sharma, you may speak to this.
This is, again, one of the routine articles in the sense that Solid Waste Fund is to execute environmentally safe disposal of solid waste. The decrease in the budget was 3.4% reduction in tonnage, largely because of reduction in tonnage drop-off at the transfer station. The town continues to vigorously support recycling initiatives and operation of transfer station. All the other necessary information is in the report.
Thank you. And as previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion. This requires a majority vote. Is there discussion on the Solid Waste Fund? And yes, I see a hand right there, fourth row.
Gordon Freed, Precinct 6. Could you comment on the, I'm fishing, comment on the economics of recycling in town?
Anybody care to comment on that? Mr. Mooring. By the way, the Solid Waste Fund is on page 33 of your Finance Committee report.
Yeah, Guilford Mooring, Superintendent of Public Works again. So the recycling feasibility, or the economic viability of recycling, we lose money when we recycle bottles and cans, but we make up for it when we recycle paper. So right now we're probably breaking even on the whole enterprise. When we also go with metal, we recycle metal, we recycle some other things, and those also pay us money as well. But then again, we lose money when we do mattresses and some things. The Solid Waste Committee is actually in the process of doing a solid waste study and master plan to come up with a plan for the future of how we should continue with our program at the transfer station. But overall, we tend to break even with our recycling program. We're always looking at ways to make it better. The MRF in Springfield has gone to a single stream recycling. We at the transfer station have stayed dual stream, so we recycle bottles and cans in one bin and paper in the other bin. That actually gives us a better quality recycling material. And we actually have people calling us for our paper and asking for our paper. No one here works for DEP, do they? So what we do is we kind of send a few, because we have a higher quality paper, we tend to send more stuff to people who are calling for it and paying us a higher price. Using the MRF, we get a lower price, and one of the things the Solid Waste Committee is looking at is whether or not to continue going to the MRF and whether we need to change how we do that and capitalize on our paper recycling because it's such a higher quality and minimize our costs for our other stuff. I hope that explains it, and I didn't say too much, but that's kind of where we are.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Yes, in the back there.
Mary Streeter, Precinct 8. A while ago, maybe a year ago or 6 months ago, I participated in a survey that was online. I think it was about the same topic, and I've never seen any report or result from that. Can you comment on that or let me know where we could find that information?
Mr. Mooring.
That's exactly part of the master plan study they're doing, and it's the master plan's in draft form. The Solid Waste Committee, the Recycling and Refuse Committee should have a report coming out within the next 2 months talking about what people wanted and what we want to do with our facilities.
Further discussion? Yes, over there, front
Denise Barrett, Precinct 9. I know we lost our recycling coordinator to the greener pastures of Northampton. And it looks to me from the report like the position has been eliminated, but then it says further on in that paragraph, the responsibilities are moved into the general fund. So what I don't understand is, has the position been eliminated and somebody else is doing it, or is it somebody that we're paying under the general fund taking over those responsibilities?
Mr. Moran?
The position right now is unfunded and unfilled. The day-to-day operations that the recycling coordinator did and the required stuff for DEP has been transferred to the operator or the supervisor at the transfer station, Steve Talega. He'll do those parts. All the other pieces that go with it, some of that stuff will not be done. Some of that stuff is done by me, and I'm only paid for out of the general fund and the other two enterprise funds. The solid waste fund doesn't pay for any of the office staff right now.
Further discussion before a vote? Yes, right front center.
Larry Kelly, Precinct 5. I'm just curious, in this digital age, have you noticed a decrease in our wonderful paper tonnage over the last, say, 10 years?
Mr. Mooring.
No. Paper's holding very steady. Newspaper print is decreasing. White paper, junk mail, that type of stuff is holding pretty steady. Cardboard has been a big increase in cardboard. Everybody who gets their stuff from Amazon in the digital age, you order online, you get a box. There's more boxes coming in and more packing stuff for boxes, so we're getting more of that type of stuff.
Further discussion before a vote? Yes, I see a hand in the second row there. Wait. Microphone. And identify yourself, please.
Eleanor Manier Gotti. What is MRF?
Mr. Mooring.
Thank you. It is not a small blue creature. It stands for the Material Recycling Facility. It's located in Springfield, right off 91.
Further discussion before a vote? I see no hands. So we'll now come to a vote on the motion that you see on the screen for the Solid Waste Fund. This requires a majority. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it unanimously. And we move on to the Transportation Fund. And yes, Ms. Ratner for the Finance Committee.
I move that the town appropriate $716,751 for the Transportation Fund, and that to meet such appropriation, $716,751 be made available from Transportation Fund revenues of the current year. And may I ask Mr. Sharma to speak for the Finance Committee?
Yes, but first we have a second. I hear a second. Mr. Sharma, you may speak.
The Finance Committee voted 6-0 with one vacancy for this article. The Transportation Fund is a self-supporting enterprise fund again, with the purpose of providing parking and public transportation system for the town via that enterprise fund. Appropriation is largely unchanged. FT increased 0.4 from last year. One thing worth highlighting is that PVTA assumed the cost of operating Route 33. So that reduced the cost for us. Includes a payment of $27,000 for OPED. Thank you.
The Select Board, as previously reported, has recommended this motion. It requires a majority. We are on page 34 of the Finance Committee book. And is there any discussion on the Transportation Fund? Yes, right there in the aisle.
Leo Maley, Precinct 5. I notice in the explanation something there about the PVTA picking up the cost of Route 33. I don't remember anymore which one that is. And with this, following this pickup of the cost, are we contributing to buses? The PVTA, I guess.
Mr. Musanti.
Yeah, I happen to know very well the chair of the PVTA Advisory Board. With the service analysis that was done region-wide by PVTA, including in Amherst, there were a number of service improvement changes that went into effect last September, which included the creation of this new Route 33 that serves the Amity, portions of the Amity shuttle up through North Amherst. And then there were other service improvements, including frequency. The Route 32 bus, which was the so-called outreach route bus that PVTA had discontinued because of budget cuts 8 or 9 years ago. The town assumed the cost of that over the years, and in the last year we did that. That was costing the town $150,000. In the reconfiguration of the routes and the discontinuance of that route and its absorption into 2 other routes, that is funded through the PVTA assessment, of which the town contributes, for all of the service, but also UMass Transit and 5 College Inc. Effectively pays about 2/3 of our assessment. So that has generated substantial savings that we are attempting to reinvest a large chunk of that into capital improvements in our parking system. And you see in this recommended budget improvements to the Bullwood Walk concrete decking that has deteriorated. And I'm hoping over the next year to bring forward recommendations to at last renovate the Amity Street parking lot and the Main Street lot.
Further discussion on transportation fund? Yes, front row over there.
Rob Kestner, Precinct 3. I'd like to congratulate the chair of the PVTA Advisory Board for the good work he did. He seems to be smiling. I guess he knows him very well. But I would like to point out, though, that the service changes, which we'll see probably in about a week when the University of Massachusetts goes onto its summer schedule, potentially will leave residents of a couple of the larger communities in town that have relied on what had been the Amity shuttle without as frequent or perhaps without any regular bus service, in particular the Village Park on East Pleasant Street, which is now served or had been served by the Amity shuttle, isn't directly served by the new 33. And I think this is always an ongoing thing, how transportation changes. And we have Uber. When I was on the select board, we started taxi services, or businesses started them. We were approving them frequently. The chair of the PVTA Advisory Board will probably be seeing proposals for changes over time. And I hope this town meeting will continue to be willing to help fund exploratory proposals that might not be initially paid for by the PVTA. I'm sure we'll find out whether folks at Village Park are served. I understand also, because I don't see him anymore, but the assistant town manager and the health director came before of all things, the Milwaukee Rail Trail Advisory Committee about a year ago, asking about residents of the Boulders being able to get to other parts of the Pioneer Valley, in particular to the malls in Hadley. And that's apparently another ongoing issue that could be served by people walking and biking, but may also require additional bus-type services. So anyway, I hope you guys will keep an open mind to continue to fund experiments with better transportation for everybody. Thank you.
Is there further discussion before we come to a vote? I see no hands. We will now come to a vote on the transportation fund motion, which you see before you on the screen. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Ayes have it unanimously. We now move on to public safety, and I call on someone on the Finance Committee to make a motion.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town appropriate $9,943,955 for public safety, and to meet such appropriation, $7,537,676 be raised by taxation, and $2,406,279 be transferred from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation account.
I hear a second. You may speak to your motion.
Mr. Moderator, the public safety budget represents a 3.6% increase over the current fiscal year, and I'll refer town meeting members to pages 35 and 36 of the Finance Committee report for details. The innovation in this budget includes the addition of 2 new police officers, bringing staffing in the department to a total of 47. Increases in the fire department and ambulance service budgets reflect steps in the cost of living adjustments contained in the collective bargaining agreements and to fund overtime staffing for 8 firefighters per shift in the academic year. The animal welfare budget remains essentially unchanged. The Finance Committee unanimously recommends the passage of this article.
Thank you. As previously reported, the Select Board recommends this motion, and this also requires a majority vote. Public safety portion of the budget is in detail on the Finance Committee report, page 35, and I am going to go through the line items at the top here. So are there questions, issues with police facility? I see no hands. How about police? Yes, over there.
Amy Middleman, Precinct 5. I'd like to know why the Amherst Police Supervisors Union has been working without a contract since July 1st, 2013, and who's responsible for negotiating with them and what the state of those negotiations are. Thank you.
Mr. Masanti.
The Police Supervisors Unit is the last remaining town bargaining unit without a collective bargaining agreement. We are in active negotiations with them, good faith bargaining. We are at we're in mediation. We're at the Joint Labor Management Committee with that bargaining unit, and negotiations are continuing. I am the negotiator on behalf of the town with all of the bargaining units.
Any other questions on police? We move on to fire EMS. I'm sorry, I'm still looking. Yes, second row.
Frank Addy, Precinct 8. Question about the grant being run out in this, for civilian domestic violence. Wondered how that's being handled. It said duties are being spread out. I guess there is some concern about that as a sensitive position, and wondered if there was some comments.
Chief Sherpa. Livingstone. Oh, Chief Livingstone, I'm sorry. Boy, that just popped right out, didn't it?
Scott Livingstone, Police Chief. I was in the cheap seat, so which position were we talking about that was grant funded? I didn't hear the entire question.
So, Mr. Gotti, could you repeat your question to him?
Yeah, the grant apparently in the notes said the grant for domestic violence worker had run out. Duties were being put to a group of other, and the question was, how is that affecting things? It's kind of a sensitive position.
Sure, that was the domestic justice grant that we received. It was originally about a $400,000 grant that we received in coordination with the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and Northampton Police Departments. So the portion of that grant that funded an additional police officer to do the domestic violence investigations was not renewed. What we had done with that was we took a veteran officer who did the investigations portion of that, and we're able to add a patrol officer onto that. So we just kind of incorporated that. No, we didn't actually lose an officer when the grant was ran out. It was attributed through retirement, so we didn't lose a body. But the actual investigator portion of that was just gobbled up by our detective bureau. So the investigations are still ongoing. We just lost the funding for it.
Any other questions on police? I see a hand back there, back row.
I know the district
I'm
attorney.
sorry, identify
Excuse me,
yourself.
Richard Morse, Precinct 7, I'm sorry. I know that the district attorney has various initiatives going on domestic violence and domestic violence prevention and responding to those. I'm wondering if you're seeing any decrease or a decrease in the increase in the volume of domestic violence calls within the borders of Amherst.
Sure, we've seen an increase in the number of sexual assaults that have been reported to us. It's a little early to tell exactly the reason for that. I think there's a lot more awareness of it. We've also got our civilian advocate who's doing an awful lot of work. She works 24 hours a week right in the police facility with our patrol officers and detectives. So I think there's just a lot more outreach that's going on as well. So, I'm not too concerned that there's more of it going on. I think there's more people coming forward to report.
I see a hand back there, yes.
Janet McGowan, Precinct 8. In the report, there's a line talking about the addition of the 2 new officers, but it's still less than 2007. And it says the additional officers will allow staffing of most but not all town sectors. So what isn't being covered? I guess what do you feel like is not being covered?
Yeah, don't get Chief. I mean, don't fret over it. What happened was in 2009 when I became police chief, I changed a couple of major things. I changed were how officers were responsible for police sectors. I wanted them to be more proactive, get out in the community, have community meetings and things like that. So we put a lot more emphasis on officers going out and problem solving and speaking with neighborhood groups and setting up meetings and that sort of thing. We originally had 3 sectors in the town. Basically, if you looked at a map of the town of Amherst, divided it down the middle, there was a north sector, there was a central sector, there was a south sector. We broke it down a little bit smaller so that officers didn't have such large areas to work and they can concentrate more on the sectors that they were assigned to. So there are now 6 sectors, but we didn't have enough patrol officers to fill each individual sectors on all shifts. So the day shift, the midnight shift, and 4 to 12 shift, each one of those officers assigned to those sectors would be responsible for certain aspects in problem solving. So although there are always police officers in the north sector, center sector, or the south sector on each patrol shift, we weren't able to quite fulfill all 6 sectors. So some officers were doing dual duty, covering the northeast and the northwest, and whether it was the southeast, the southwest, that sort of thing. So you're always going to have officers patrolling the sectors of your town, but they weren't able to do as much outreach as we had hoped for.
I see another hand back there.
Mary Streeter, Precinct 8. I'm wondering if you could comment, we've been so aware of what's happening nationally, if you could comment on Amherst Police and the use of video. Do they have them on their uniforms? Are they on their cars? And what kind of video might come into the police station?
Sure.
Chief.
We've had in-car video systems in our cruisers for about 20, 22 years, and you'll see that come up in Capitol quite frequently where we'll be requesting either upgrades or replacement. We're actually the 2nd police department in the state to have video in our cruisers. Body-worn cameras, we're going down that road. They're expensive. They're about $1,000 a unit. And the Presidential Commission is recommending that all police officers at some point are going to be wearing body-worn cameras. There's a lot of technology out there, and there's a lot of fly-by-night companies, quite frankly. So we're still investigating which camera would be best for us. I hosted a vendor show in March where it was attended by most of the Western Mass police chiefs just to get an idea of what is out there. But yes, they're coming, and it's a matter of cost, how to pay for them, that sort of thing.
Anything else on police? How about fire EMS? I see a hand way back there.
Bonnie McCracken, Precinct 6, and mother of firefighter Chris Bascom. I'd like to us, as a community, to go out and support our firefighters by showing support that we do want them to have a new fire station. They're feeling somewhat neglected. And I also don't think 8 firefighters per shift is sufficient. On my way to Northampton yesterday, of course, I always look at ambulances and fire trucks, and yes, my heart jumps an extra beat or two when I see one. But by the time I got to the fairgrounds in Northampton, I saw an ambulance coming towards me. It was not a Northampton ambulance. It was our ambulance. By the time I reached historic Northampton, another ambulance was flying by. This was 1:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday. So it was 2 Amherst ambulances with their lights on, racing back to emergencies here. We need more fire staff, and we need a bigger firehouse. That firehouse was not built to accommodate both men and women firefighters. Thank you.
More discussion on fire EMS? Yes.
James Barat, Precinct 1. Could you give us an idea how much UMass pays us for the ambulance service, and how much they seem to require an awful lot of service, a lot more than the residents.
Mr. Masanti?
Yeah, we've had an agreement with the university for many years now, and it's a formula based on their relative share of ambulance calls in relation to the total volume of calls, and there's a whole formula we go through to prorate what that cost is, and they pay that amount to us. In the current year, that works out to about $380,000. In addition to that, over the last, and both parties think that's a fair number, and it's been in place for a while now. In addition to that, in the last 3 academic years, the university has contributed an additional $80,000, and that's used at the chief's discretion during the academic year, typically on Friday and Saturday evenings, occasional Thursdays, and occasional other days where we think we might have a large EMS activity. That has allowed us to have as many as 13 people on duty and 5 ambulances in service, serving the entire town. So that, and in addition to that, Chief Nelson and his people have had really forged an excellent working relationship with the management of the Mullins Center at UMass when there are certain types of events there that might require EMS coverage. The Mullins has been hiring multiple detail ambulances from either Amherst or other Western Mass departments to staff that up, so that we're not taking a townwide ambulance out of service to focus exclusively on the Mullins Center. So a combination of those things have worked well, but that's all in the rise of face of rising call volume across the year.
Anything else on fire EMS? Yes, front center.
Larry Kelly, Precinct 5. The other way of looking at this is AFD keeps very good stats. So last year, I think it was almost exactly 20% of their total runs, that would be fire trucks and ambulances, 20% was to the University of Massachusetts. That's, I mean, just do the math. We're, you know, AFD costs $5 million. Half of the $10 million up there is AFD. 20% of that is $1 million. So the town manager just said they're paying us $380,000. So it doesn't really, and then when you think about it, that runs to the campus. As we all know, 40% of the students live off campus. So maybe we could ask the chief, but I'm sure if you factor in how much time does AFD spend with UMass students off campus, there's probably another 10% of their time. And as well, we have PD which is probably 20% of Amherst police time, is dedicated to dealing with students off campus. Even though UMass has its own police department, they don't have a fire department, period, and our police department ends up dealing with them 20% of their time. APD's budget is $5 million, so 20% of that is $1 million. So UMass really should be paying us $1 million for AFD, $1 million for APD. And wait till we get to the school budget.
Further discussion on fire EMS? Yes, Mr. Basanti.
Yeah, I just want to remind folks that the budget that was just referred to is the fire/EMS budget. There's a substantial portion of that budget that's devoted to fire trucks and fire equipment and preventing and putting out fires. So the formula with the university related to the ambulance costs was segregating out what we think was a logical proportion of that budget that's devoted to ambulance service.
Yes, all the way in the back.
Tracy Lee Boutillier, Precinct 6. I didn't hear an answer to the question about, how much sorry, just lost my train of thought. Yeah, not the ambulance receipts, but the calls that are going towards students that live in town. What are the percentage of the calls that are going for students in town, UMass students in town, as well as on campus? So we didn't get a clear answer to the previous question.
No one's required to answer. Mr. Basanti, you want to give it a try?
Yeah, I don't have that stat handy, but knowing that the cost of ambulance service is paid for by agreements like we just described with the university, but it's paid by private insurance held by citizens, including students, and paid by tax dollars paid on properties in town, including those that are rented to students.
Yes, center, back row.
Paige Wilder, Precinct 10. I'm just getting a little more confused. Are the ambulance receipts covering the fire truck calls to the southwest dorms? Because 5 to 7 trucks go by every weekend to the southwest.
Mr. Basanti?
The ambulance receipts are covering the ambulance calls, not the fire calls.
Anything else on fire EMS? Yes, front row right here.
Jerry Weiss, Precinct 8. This is a comment and question for both fire, EMS, and police. Maybe somebody could comment. There's a large building, apartment building going up downtown, and another one being planned. The developers have assured us that it will be a fairly small influx of students living there. There are those of us who are pretty skeptical of that claim. I wonder if the fire chief and police chief have been involved in any conversations about the potential effects of the predicted students and or the more likely number of students that could cause increased need for police and EMS.
Anybody? Mr. Basanti?
Yeah, the two chiefs might want to add particulars, but the short answer is yes, they've been involved in the development application review. There's a wide variety of town staff that are engaged from Public Works, Public Safety, and others with that. So fire ground safety, how the building's designed, situated, what the access is, et cetera. So I think the short answer of that is yes, and I'm as curious as you are to see the demographics of the lessees in the building opening in August. I think you'll be a little surprised.
Further discussion on fire EMS? How about on communication center? Or animal welfare? Any more discussion? Are we ready to come to a vote? I see a hand in the back aisle there.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Phil Jackson, registered voter in Amherst. As a previous speaker alluded to, the real issue with public safety is one of resources. And I'm not suggesting that public safety is more important than any other town service, but it's different. And it's different because it runs 24 hours a day.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I hear a point of order. Oh, yes, a registered voter in Amherst is allowed to speak, yes. I'm sorry, you may continue.
Thank you. So I'm not suggesting that public safety is inherently more important than other town functions, but it's inherently different. They run continuous operations 365 days a year. They run shift models. If you don't understand how shifts work, you have multiple teams that have to come in every day, and it's a real resource challenge to keep those shifts adequately staffed. The staff is highly specialized. You can't ask somebody to be a police officer or firefighter or an EMT because somebody didn't show up for work that day. The work that they do is highly variable. It's unpredictable. Every call that comes in is the same, whether it ends up being a false alarm or an actual emergency. A certain number of resources have to be sent. Additional resources might have to be sent. And those resources aren't freed up to do other things until they're cleared from those calls. The work they do is obviously high stakes. It's dangerous at times. Margin of errors are very small. The consequences of making mistakes are huge. Most importantly, I think what this body fails to ignore, and the town chooses to ignore year after year, is that the staffing for fire and police is not pulled out of thin air. It's dictated by national safety standards. And under those standards, the Amherst Fire Department should have 56 firefighters. They're currently 16 short of that. The Amherst Police Department should have 75. So if you vote in these two, it's a drop in a very large bucket. So voting in an economic development director and hopefully those things that will alleviate some of the burden on private homeowners to carry all of the things that we try to fund in this town will introduce some revenue. I certainly hope the town manager and the finance director will find a way to actually develop a plan to bring these departments up to something approximating the strength that they should be at. And if you're a town meeting member and you haven't gone on a ride along and you haven't gone and talked to the public safety folks, I strongly encourage that you do it. 10 years ago, I was here in my first town meeting and there was a request for additional resources in the communication center. And I, like lots of people, said, they answer the phone. What do you need more of them for? And then I went and spent about 3 or 4 hours up there, and I absolutely had my mind blown by what these people did. The town of Amherst is not the sleepy little Mayberry place that you think it is. And if you go spend some time looking around and finding out what really goes on in this town and how this very professional force manages to do what they do with very, very little, I think you'd be shocked. So I hope you'll vote for the 2 officers tonight. It's a step in the right direction, but it's only a modest step in the right direction. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on public safety before we come to a vote? Yes, right there. Microphone, please.
Barbara Ford, Precinct 2. I have a question about the fines that we've been collecting. Are we collecting all of the court fines that have been assessed? In other words, what is our record on those kinds of fines?
Mr. somebody? Mr. Pooler.
Actually, I may ask the police chief to comment on that. I think that would be better.
Okay, Chief Livingstone, come on down. Thought you were done, huh?
The question was about fines collected. Are they specific to motor vehicle, town bylaw fines? I'm sorry, nuisance house? Sure, so what happens is if an officer goes to a call and they have discretion about what they want to do with that particular residence, they can issue verbal warnings, they can issue a TBL fine, which is $300, or they can make arrest. If it's a fine that they issue, a $300 fine goes to the court, the clerk magistrate, or then the judge determines what that fine will be. Typically what happens is the judges or clerk magistrate will take into consideration that these are students, and if they're not repeat offenders, they'll usually reduce the fine to about $50. Not what we had in mind when we went, before town meeting and had the fines from $50 raised to $300, but that's just the nature of the criminal justice system.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I see a hand in the third row there.
Caroline Murray, Precinct 4. I'm sorry, but I have to respond to, what was your name? Jackson? Phil Jackson?
Excuse
Phil?
me, you don't respond
And
to a person.
I'm
you
not,
speak
okay,
to the
great.
meeting.
I'm going to respond to the comments that were made earlier regarding this
Good.
and the fact that we are increasing the budget by 2 police officers. Quite frankly, I'm not really sure why we need that. It was referenced that they're based on federal standards. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there is a national outcry going on around federal standards around policing, while thousands of people are protesting over policing and the militarization of our police force in Baltimore as we speak. This town is not immune to that, and if we are going to have a conversation about increasing our policing, I think we should have a community conversation with the police force about the fact that there are young people of color in this town who feel that the police follow them, and there are many people of color who have felt over-policed and been pulled over for driving while black in this town by this force. So I'm not going to vote for increasing our police force. I will vote for, however, having a community-wide conversation about community policing and how we can treat our citizens with respect.
Now right in the front row here in the aisle. Wait for the microphone.
Hello. When I was here before.
Please try and please identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Harry Brooks, Precinct 4. When I was here before, the local police, offered, I think 15, maybe it was one, I don't know how many weeks it was, thing of community policing. We learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from that because I used it in the outside world. And now I hear that's given by the university police. And I think it ought to be back where it was. You did a wonderful job. I've saved a lot of lives with that. I kid you not. Just what I learned from your staff. And you should not put it just for students. It's for all of us. And you did a wonderful job. And we're not doing it anymore. We're doing it within the student police force. I remember, and I'll be very quick, I remember one time I was on a barefoot cruise in the Bahamas, and a kid came across the deck, tripped, fell, cut himself, and first thing I did was say, give me towels, because the water was right there too. I used those towels, and they were ready to put them right in the wash. And I said, no way in hell you're going to do that. And they didn't. Next day they had to write the test. But it was your department that taught me that. And it shouldn't be outside your department. I think you would offer that again for everybody in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand here.
Yeah, Kenton Tharp, Precinct 1, and I thank our long-term member for still being a member over here and appreciate all the work he's done and all the comments he just made. I do have one question, which is our new canine, anybody know his name or her name? Dash. Okay, good. Thank you.
Further discussion before we come to a vote. Yes, I see a hand right here, second row.
John Hornick, Precinct 7. I want to comment briefly on the police department's outreach effort, at least one effort I'm aware of. I've been working on a study of the Amherst seasonal shelter over the past several months, And one of the things that I learned is that Chief Livingston created a small team within the police department that focus on individuals who are homeless. And one of the things that the team tries to do, at least one individual, is to go to the shelter for an hour or so, or sometimes longer, every evening from November through April while the shelter is still open. From the point of view of the shelter staff and the officers and others, that's an extraordinary piece of outreach. It means that if the police need to come to the shelter for regular police business, that is to arrest somebody or to intervene, people don't panic. They've met officers, they've had a chance to talk to them, they're familiar with them if they see them on the street. I think that's the kind of outreach that Chief Livingston initiated, and it's something that his department does that we should all be proud of. I will say also that there are occasions when the team can't get to the shelter on an evening, and it's when there are more events around town demanding the presence of police officers so that they have to be someplace else. So I think this kind of illustrates both the importance of the outreach function and the value of having additional police. So I certainly will vote for this. Thank you.
Speaking of voting, are we ready to come to a vote? Looks like we are. Okay, we are now voting on the motion on the screen before us for the public safety portion of the budget. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. The ayes have it. I call on Ms. Brewer to make a motion.
I move to adjourn to Monday, May 4th at 7 p.m.
Motion to adjourn is not debatable. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. We are adjourned. See you next week.